What if your garden could feed you, take care of itself, and get more productive every year? This is the first in a series of videos where I'm going to be teaching you guys all about food forests. We're going to go over details of everything that you've ever had questions about. And if for some reason you have more questions, let me know and I will do another video on those. But here we are. What is a food forest? When I first learned about food forests, it felt like gardening and magic had come together in one beautiful combination. So let's break down what they are, why they matter, and how to make one. So a food forest mimics a normal woodland setting. So when you go for a walk in the woods, you see lots of different plants. You see a canopy, you see an herbaceous level, you see ground cover, you see shrubs, you see a secondary canopy which is a lot smaller than the primary canopy, right? Now, you don't have to go out and water the trees in the forest every day, right? You don't have to care for a forest in order for it to become productive. It just grows and is. Now, what if we could mimic that same energy that's going into that forest and use the same plan, but instead of having things like maple trees or oaks as the primary canopy, what if we use things like fruit trees? And instead of having shrubbery that is like a Japanese barberry bush, instead we had things like blueberries or raspberries. What if our ground cover was an ivy and instead strawberries? So a food forest mimics a natural woodland setting. So there are layers of plants. There are trees, there are shrubs, there are herbs, there are vines, there are ground covers, there's root systems, and there's fungi. In the forest, each plant fills a role, whether it's for food, fertility, for habitat, or for beauty. And we can do that in a food forest. For the canopy, we can have things like apples and pears, chestnuts, things like that. For our sub-canopy, we can have things like serviceberry, persimmon, and dwarf cherries, or any dwarf kind of tree, right? Our shrubs would be blueberries, raspberries, currants, rosa rugosa, things like that. Our herbaceous level would be things like comfrey, yarrow, bee balm, or chamomile. Ground covers could be things like strawberries, clover, or creeping thyme. The root layer could be things like horseradish, onions, garlic, dandelion, sunchokes, things like that. Our vines could be things like grapes or hardy kiwi or Schisandra vine. Okay, actually, I have to leave my food forest in order to talk to you about my food forest because the guineas are nesting in it and it's getting darker and they're just being really, really loud. So we're going to come out to the field and the orchard, and that's where I'm going to talk to you about food forests. Okay, so the basic design principles of a food forest are right plant in the right place. So you're going to want to have a canopy, and then along the drip line of that, you're going to want to have the shrubs. Below that, you're going to want to have the ground cover, which is very beneficial and cuts down on weeds. Like, who wants to be weeding their garden? I'd rather just eat strawberries, right? So if you place them in the correct area of what we would call a guild, which is a family of plants that work together to make an ecosystem very similar to a forest, then we're going to want to make sure that they are getting the right kind of light, that they're getting the right kind of soil, and they're getting the right kind of water, and all those needs that they have are being met. So in order for it to become a self-sustaining ecosystem, so that it is not only gaining fertility throughout the years, we're going to have several different roles filled within these guilds. And you can imagine a guild is like one or two fruit trees and the surrounding plants around it. And then another guild would be another one or two fruit trees with the surrounding plants around that. So first thing, you're going to want to have a fruit tree. You're also going to want to have nitrogen fixers because fruit takes a lot of nitrogen from the soil. So you're going to have plants in there that are naturally adding more nitrogen to the soil from the air consistently. You're going to want herbs and pollinator flowers because you want to have the herbs deter pests and the pollinator flowers bring in the beneficial insects. And those ground covers, they are wonderful, keeping back the weeds and keeping the things that you have planted healthy because they're not competing for nutrients in the soil with things like grass. Also, the beautiful thing about food forests is it has a lot of diversity, and diversity builds resilience, which prevents diseases and pests from wiping out whole systems. You'll see in major orchards that they have the same tree planted over and over and over again in one big long group, and a disease hits and it goes from one tree to the next, to the next, to the next. But in a food forest, you have, between your fruit trees, you have multiple different kinds of fruit trees. You'll have a peach and then you'll have a nectarine, or you'll have an apple and then a pear, or a cherry, or a persimmon, or a medlar, or something like that. And so the disease isn't easily transmissible. Also, the pests get confused and they don't just have this huge gourmet banquet laid out in front of them. It's hard for them to get from one to the other without getting attacked by your beneficial insects, because you have created a habitat that creates an environment for many beneficial insects that can be predatory on these pests, as well as birds and things like that that will also take care of any pests that may come in. So with a food forest, you can start small. This fruit tree that I have right here, I could turn that into a guild. I could have a mini food forest right here and it would be very successful. I could do another one over here when I'm ready. So 1 year here, the next year I add another one, the next year I add another one, and maybe I start adding enough things where soon the two get connected and becomes one large guild. And then as they soon grow, right, as I'm adding more things, this becomes not just a guild, but an entire food forest area. So one of the major questions is, why is it worth it, right? Why would you build something like a food forest rather than just like a garden, right? Or an orchard or a berry patch or something like that? Well, because if all those plants are working together, it becomes extraordinarily low maintenance. You don't have to worry about mulch because the leaves are mulching it for you. You don't have to provide fertilizers because you've got all these nitrogen fixers that are in there. You don't have to worry about spraying for pests or diseases or anything like that, because you have an ecosystem that is balanced and maintained by itself rather than you, just like the woods. A lot of people come into it thinking that a food forest is overwhelming. It's a lot to take on. Building a whole forest, well, you don't have to do that. You can start small. Remember, you can start a food forest with one tree and just build a circle of its friends around it, and there you go, okay? So as you get more and more comfortable, you can add to it, but don't think that this has to be something crazy and overwhelming, because it is not. It is just an idea of how to make food perennial, taking care of itself, low maintenance, and something that can give you food for a long time. In the editing stage, I just wanted to add, one of the reasons why food forests are so great is because it's a lot more economical as well as far as space. You are growing food upwards in all those different layers rather than just along the length of your lawn or something like that. So it's really great on saving space and getting more bang for your buck. Another editing thing that I wanted to add, this is a zone 6B food forest. And I know that there's a lot of people who have seen food forests or heard of food forests, but most of them are in like the tropical, really warm climates. And so when I was first starting my food forest, I wasn't sure even if I could have a food forest in my climate because there wasn't a lot of resources for that. So I want you to know, yes, you can. And not only can you have an amazing food forest, but it can be incredibly abundant and beautiful as well. So don't just look and see, oh, they're growing all this tropical fruit all the time, I can't do that. No, if you live in a temperate area, you are more than capable of having an extraordinary food forest, as long as you just plant the right plants. Remember, right plant, right place. So if you could start a food forest today, what plant would you start with? Put it in the comments below. I want to know. My food forest started off with a peach tree. That's it. just one peach tree. And now I have an entire forest. Now I have a second orchard that I'm starting something new with. It's addicting and beautiful and lovely, but mine just started with a peach tree. What would you start with? Now, if you are a member of our page, I have full downloadable content linked below where you can get the full food forest guide below, and it shows you all the different layers. It shows you things that you can plant in those different layers of the food forest, because remember that we've got those 7 layers, right? And it shows you how to start, things to look out for, things that you might want to consider before you begin. It's got inspiration in it. It's got a whole bunch of stuff. And so if you're a member, make sure you get that below. Also, for those of you who are not members, I have a free simplified version, and you can get that just for yourself. You don't even have to be a member or anything. But I do ask, please like and subscribe, because this series is going to be incredible. And next, we're going to be talking about nitrogen fixers and the best ones that you can plant for your trees. So if you're not a member, consider becoming a member, because we're going to have a ton of really great content available for you. We're also going to be having some live streams where we talk questions and answers and discuss food forests in full. And as always, guys, stay blessed.